The massive Galaxy Council building floated in space like a giant metal flower, with its silver petals stretched wide against the stars. Ambassador Jin Ho walked through the long hallways carrying a small bag that looked tiny compared to the huge weapons and armor that other alien delegates brought with them. His simple brown uniform made him look like a servant next to the shining battle suits and glowing robes worn by representatives from across the galaxy. Today was another monthly meeting, where all the different alien species would gather to discuss problems between their worlds. Jin Ho had been doing this job for 5 years now, and every single meeting was the same. The other aliens would talk about their powerful armies, their newest weapons, and their plans to conquer more planets, while the humans would sit quietly in the corner and suggest that everyone should try talking instead of fighting. The main council chamber was enormous, with seats for over 200 different species. Jin Ho found his small section marked with the simple Earth symbol and sat down, placing his bag gently on the floor. Next to him, the seats were empty because humans only sent one representative, while other species brought dozens of advisors, generals and war leaders. Prime Commander Vex from the Zirian Collective stood at the center podium, his crystal body glowing bright blue as he began the meeting. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder as he spoke about the latest border conflicts between different alien empires. Across the room, the Velox delegation was making loud clicking sounds with their claws, which Jin Ho had learned was their way of laughing. They were pointing at something in his direction, and he realized they were amused by the small potted flower he had placed on his desk. It was just a simple white orchid from Earth, but to the warrior species of the galaxy, it might as well have been a sign that said, "Humans are weak." War Marshal Krath from the Dea Thornax Empire stood up next, his 6 arms waving as he described their latest military victories against rebel planets. His species looked like giant insects with razor-sharp mandibles and armor that could stop plasma blasts. When he finished speaking, the other delegates made approving sounds and shared stories of their own battles. The Draconis Empire representative floated in the air inside a glowing energy bubble. Her serpentine body coiled elegantly as she talked about their new reality warping weapons that could make entire moons disappear. The other species nodded with respect and fear because everyone knew the Draconis had conquered more star systems than anyone else. When it was time for humans to speak, Jin Ho stood up slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. The massive room fell silent, but not from respect. It was the kind of quiet that happens when people are trying not to laugh out loud. Jin Ho could see aliens nudging each other with their claws, tentacles, and energy appendages. "Good morning, fellow representatives," Jin Ho said in his calm voice. "I am happy to report that Earth has successfully helped negotiate peace between the mining colonies on Kepler 7 and the agricultural settlements on Ross 128. Both worlds are now sharing resources and have increased their food production by 30%. The silence stretched for a moment before War Marshal Krath burst into what could only be described as insectoid laughter. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke through his translation device. The humans solved another problem by growing more food. How terrifying. The entire chamber erupted in various forms of alien amusement. The Velox were clicking their claws so hard it sounded like hail on metal. The crystalline Zirion were flashing different colors, which meant they found something extremely funny. Even the usually serious quantum mines were making their electronic buzzing sounds that indicated digital laughter. Jin Ho waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. "We also helped establish medical exchanges between former enemy species in the Outer Rim. The Zephyrian flu that was killing thousands has been completely eliminated through cooperation between their doctors and ours." This announcement caused even more laughter. A Draconis general actually fell out of his energy bubble and had to be helped back up by his assistants. "Medical cooperation," announced one of the Thornax officers. They fought a plague with friendship instead of fire. The mockery continued for several minutes while Jin Ho stood quietly at the podium. He was used to this treatment. Humans had been members of the Galaxy Council for 50 years, and in all that time they had never once threatened another species with violence. They had never showed off powerful weapons or boasted about military victories. Instead, they always talked about trade agreements, diplomatic solutions, and humanitarian aid. Captain Min Su watched From the observation deck above the main chamber, his jaw was clenched tight as he listened to the other species make fun of his people. He commanded the human escort vessel, Harmony, which was currently docked at the council station. Other aliens often joked that it was the weakest military ship in known space, and technically they were right. The Harmony carried no plasma cannons that could destroy asteroids. It had no quantum torpedoes that could punch holes through battle cruisers. It did not have reality shields that could bend space around it. Instead, it was packed with medical equipment, food processors, and communication arrays designed to help refugees and disaster victims. Minsu crew of 30 humans were all trained in what other species considered non-combat specialties. They were doctors, engineers, communications experts, and emergency rescue specialists. When other ship captains talked about their greatest battles, Minsu could only share stories about successful evacuation missions or medical emergencies they had solved. Back in the main chamber, Prime Commander Vex was asking each species to contribute their most powerful military assets to a new defense initiative. Every delegation proudly announced their contributions. The Velox promised their newest battlecruiser that could crack planets. The Thornax offered an entire swarm fleet of their biomechanical fighters. The Draconis said they would provide 3 of their reality-warping dreadnoughts. When the spotlight finally fell on Jin Ho, he cleared his throat quietly. Earth pledges our full support to the defense initiative. We will contribute our finest vessels and most experienced personnel to help protect the galaxy. The chamber exploded with laughter that was even louder than before. Several aliens were making sounds that their translation devices could not even convert to words. A Chronari delegate was laughing so hard that green fluid was leaking from his breathing holes. Your finest vessels, called out War Marshal Krath between fits of laughter. Do you mean your hospital ships and food delivery trucks? The mockery continued for nearly 10 minutes, while Jin Ho stood calmly at the podium, waiting for them to finish. He showed no sign of anger or embarrassment, just the same peaceful expression he always wore. When the laughter finally died down, he simply said, "Thank you for your consideration," and walked back to his seat. That evening, after the council session ended, Jin Ho returned to his small quarters on the human diplomatic ship. He sat at his desk and activated his secure communication system. The message he sent back to Earth was very short, containing only 3 words that would soon change everything. Release the Lux. 3 months after Ambassador Jin Ho sent his mysterious message to Earth, the galaxy discovered what real terror looked like. The first reports came from the outer mining stations near the Helix Nebula, where deep space sensors detected something impossible moving through the void. Ships unlike anything anyone had ever seen were approaching civilized space. The vessels appeared to be made of pure darkness itself, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Their hulls seemed to ripple and flow, like liquid shadow, and they moved through space without any visible propulsion systems. Scanner readings made no sense, showing energy signatures that defied every known law of physics. Captain Vox of the Thornax patrol ship Stinger was the first to make direct contact with what would later be called the Dark Fleet. His heavy cruiser was one of 12 ships guarding the mining world of Kepler 442b, when 3 of the strange black vessels emerged from hyperspace. The Thornax were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors whose ships could reduce moons to rubble. Their battle cruisers were armed with quantum disruptors that could tear apart the very atoms of enemy vessels. Captain Vox had personally destroyed over 50 enemy ships during his long military career. What happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds according to the mining station's sensor logs. The Thornax fleet immediately opened fire with everything they had. Quantum disruptors, plasma cannons, and reality-warping torpedoes all struck the 3 Dark Fleet ships simultaneously. The weapons simply vanished. The black hulls absorbed every blast, every beam, every explosive warhead as if they were nothing more than flashlight beams. The Dark Fleet vessels did not even slow down as they continued their approach toward the Thornax formation. Then the enemy ships returned fire. 3 brilliant white beams lanced out from the dark vessels, striking the lead Thornax cruiser. The massive warship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. It was there one moment and gone the next as if it had never been built. Captain Vox tried to retreat, but 11 more white beams reached out across space. In less than a minute, the entire Thornax patrol fleet had been erased from existence. The mining station watched in horror as 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy disappeared without a trace. News of the defeat spread through the galaxy. Council-like wildfire emergency sessions were called, and the greatest military minds from across known space gathered to analyze this new threat. The recordings from Kepler 442b were studied by experts from every major species, but no one could explain what they had witnessed. War Marshal Krath arrived at the Council station aboard his flagship Devastator, bringing with him detailed reports from Thornax intelligence services. The insectoid commander was visibly shaken as he addressed the emergency assembly. Our weapons had no effect, he reported through his translation device. These ships absorb energy as if they were designed specifically to counter every form of military technology we possess. We need to combine our fleets and face this threat together. The Velox immediately pledged their legendary death squadron led by Admiral Grex, whose victories numbered in the thousands. The crystalline Xerion Collective promised their reality-bending warships that could fold space itself into weapons. The proud Draconis Empire offered their most devastating planet killers, Ambassador. So Young had arrived to replace Jinho as the human representative. She sat quietly in the same corner where her predecessor had endured months of mockery. Her simple gray uniform looked even plainer next to the elaborate military dress of the alien commanders. When the war leaders asked what Earth could contribute to the combined fleet, So Young stood and spoke in the same calm voice that had characterized human diplomacy for decades. We offer our evacuation ships and medical vessels to help with refugee operations and battlefield casualties. The response was predictable. Several alien delegates made sounds of frustration. War Marshal. Krath clicked his mandibles in what might have been disgust. Admiral Grek's scales rattled with barely controlled anger. Even facing an existential threat, the other species still saw humans as useless. Captain Minsu received new orders during this time. The Harmony was assigned to refugee transport duty, moving civilians away from the expanding war zone. His crew worked around the clock using their advanced life support systems to evacuate entire populations from worlds in the Dark Fleet path. While other captains prepared for glorious battle, Minsu found himself shuttling between devastated systems. His ship medical bays were constantly filled with survivors who told horrifying stories of worlds going dark and entire fleets vanishing without a trace. The Velox Death Squadron made their stand at the binary star system of Castor Prime. Admiral Grex commanded 18 of the most advanced warships ever constructed, each one capable of destroying entire solar systems. The battle was broadcast live across the galaxy, with military experts confident that Velox technology would finally stop the mysterious invaders. The experts were completely wrong. The Dark Fleet arrived with 7 ships that moved through space like living shadows. Their black hulls rippled with energies that seemed to bend reality itself around them. The Velox opened fire with weapons that could boil oceans and crack continents. Every shot was absorbed. The enemy ships drank in the devastating energy attacks, as if they were refreshing beverages. When the Dark Fleet returned fire, their white beams reached out like fingers of death. The Death Squadron lasted exactly 13 minutes and 41 seconds longer than the Thornax Patrol Admiral Grek's final transmission was broadcast across the galaxy as his flagship died around him. Nothing can stop them, he reported in a voice filled with despair. They are not ships. They are something else entirely. Something beyond our understanding of warfare. Panic began to spread through the Galaxy Council chambers. These were not just powerful enemies, they were something that existed outside the normal rules of space combat. The quantum minds ran probability calculations that returned impossible results. The Draconis Empire generals started discussing strategic retreats. Even the warrior culture Kronari began talking about defensive positions instead of glorious attacks. Their biomechanical swarm fleets that had conquered dozens of star systems were suddenly being repositioned to protect their homeworlds instead of seeking battle. Through all the chaos and fear, the humans remained strangely calm. Ambassador So Young continued to propose humanitarian aid missions and evacuation plans. When War Marshal Kraft demanded to know why her people were not panicking like everyone else, she simply smiled. "We have learned that panic rarely improves any situation," she replied calmly. "Earth believes in being prepared for whatever challenges we might face." Captain Minsu discovered something interesting during his refugee missions. While other military vessels struggled to approach planets under Dark Fleet attack, human ships seemed to move freely through the danger zones. Enemy vessels appeared to ignore medical transports and supply ships completely. His communications officer, Tejo, reported the pattern during one of their evacuation runs. "Captain, the Dark Fleet ships are not targeting us at all. They scan our vessel, but then move on, as if we are not worth their attention." Minsu nodded thoughtfully as he watched another human medical ship pass safely through what should have been a deadly combat zone. The Dark Fleet was ignoring them completely, treating human vessels like they were invisible or perhaps not worth destroying. Other species began requesting human evacuation services as more worlds fell to the advancing enemy. The aliens who had mocked human weakness for decades now depended on human ships to save their civilians from the unstoppable dark vessels. War Marshal Vex contacted Ambassador So Young directly as the military situation continued to deteriorate. "Human vessels are the only ships that can safely approach Dark Fleet positions," he admitted. "Why are they ignoring your people?" So Young considered the question carefully before answering. "Perhaps they do not see us as a military threat, War Marshal. After all, the galaxy has spent 50 years telling us that humans are too weak to matter in real warfare." The TR. Dark Fleet continued their advance, consuming star system after star system, while the greatest military powers in the galaxy retreated before them. And through it all, human ships moved quietly through the chaos, saving lives and asking no questions about why they alone seemed immune to the enemy attention. Ambassador So Young walked into the Galaxy Council emergency session, carrying the same humble attitude that humans had shown for 50 years. But something was different about her today. The way she moved suggested hidden depths, and anyone who looked closely at her eyes might have noticed a cold intelligence that had not been there before. Beside her walked Dr. Hyun Woo, an elderly human professor who claimed to study alien cultures, but spent most meetings taking careful notes in a small, leather notebook. His weathered face and gentle manner made him appear harmless, but today he carried himself like someone who knew dangerous secrets. The military situation had become completely desperate. World after world fell to the Dark Fleet. Advance and no weapon in the known galaxy could even scratch their black ships. The once mighty Zarian collective had lost half their territory in just 2 months. The proud Draconis Empire was retreating to their core systems for the first time in 15,000 years. Species that had fought each other for millennia now shared their most secret technologies in hopes of finding something that could damage the enemy. But every attempt failed spectacularly. The Dark Fleet ships absorbed plasma beams that could melt planets. They drank up reality warping attacks that could fold space itself. They ignored quantum weapons that operated outside normal physics. War Marshal Vex stood at the center of the council chamber, his crystalline form flickering with desperate energy. The Zarian leader had aged visibly over the past months as his military forces were systematically destroyed. Every strategy had failed. Every weapon proved useless. "Ambassador, So Young," he said with barely concealed desperation, "your people's evacuation efforts have been adequate. We are grateful for the lives you have saved, but we need something that can actually fight back. What can Earth truly contribute to this war? Besides medical ships?" So Young looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of species, all waiting for her answer. Their faces showed fear, frustration, and growing hopelessness. The greatest military powers in galactic history were being crushed by an enemy they could not understand. "Before I answer that question, War Marshal, may I ask how long your species has been traveling between stars?" She replied calmly. The question seemed strange, but Vex answered with what remained of his pride. "The Zarian collective has sailed the void for 8,000 years. We have perfected every aspect of space warfare across that entire time." So Young nodded politely, then looked to other delegates. "And the Velox Empire, Admiral Grex, if your people had survived, would have told us 12,000 years of glorious conquest, came the bitter reply from a surviving Velox officer. The Draconis Empire boasted 15,000 years of stellar dominance. The Chronari claimed 20,000 years of biomechanical evolution. Each species seemed eager to prove their ancient heritage of space-based civilization and military superiority. Fascinating, So Young said quietly. Dr. Hyun-woo, would you please share with the Council how long humans have been capable of traveling between stars? The elderly professor stood slowly, his kind eyes becoming surprisingly hard. Approximately 300 years, Ambassador. We are indeed the youngest spacefaring race represented in this chamber. The assembled aliens made confused sounds. If humans were so new to space, how had they developed such advanced medical and evacuation technologies? How had they survived first contact with aggressive species? How had they earned any respect at all? Dr. Hyun-woo continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the massive chamber. But perhaps the Council would be interested to know how long humans have been practicing warfare on their home planet. He paused, looking around at the variety of alien faces. The oldest military manual from our world was written over 2,000 years ago, but we have archaeological evidence of organized human warfare dating back more than 10,000 years. Impossible, scoffed a surviving Thornax officer. You have only been in space for 3 centuries, correct? Dr. Hyun-woo replied with deadly calm. We spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other efficiently on a single world. The chamber fell completely silent. For comparison, your species learned warfare while conquering multiple star systems. We learned it while trapped together on one small planet. War Marshal Vex crystalline form stopped flickering as the implications began to sink in. What exactly are you saying? Professor Dr. Hyun-woo opened his leather notebook and began reading. We developed chemical weapons that could kill millions, biological warfare that could destroy entire populations, nuclear devices that could render continents uninhabitable. We created psychological operations that could drive enemies insane, economic warfare that could collapse civilizations without firing a shot. The alien delegates listened in growing horror as the elderly human continued his list. Guerrilla tactics that let small forces defeat massive armies, cyber warfare that could destroy technology from the inside, total war concepts that mobilized entire populations, urban combat techniques that turned every building into a fortress, asymmetric warfare that made strength irrelevant. Ambassador So Young stood again, her diplomatic mask slipping slightly. The truth is, Council members, that when humans first met other species, we were absolutely terrified. Not of your weapons or your military might, but of ourselves. She began walking slowly around the chamber, her voice growing stronger. We realized that if we approached the galaxy the way we had approached our own world for 10 millennia, we would become the monsters that our ancestors had spent centuries learning to fight. Captain Min-soo watched from the observation deck, feeling a familiar weight in his stomach. He had known this moment would come eventually, the day when humanity would have to reveal what they really were beneath their peaceful exterior. So we made a choice. So Young continued. We decided to become the people we wished we had always been. We turned our weapons factories into medical research centers. We converted our warships into hospital vessels. We transformed our military academies into diplomatic schools. The chamber remained deadly quiet as she spoke. But we never forgot how to fight. We simply chose not to, because we had learned that there are always consequences to violence that extend far beyond the immediate battle. War Marshal Vex's voice was barely a whisper. Are you telling us that humans have been pretending to be weak this entire time? Not pretending, Dr. Hyun-woo corrected gently. We genuinely became peaceful. But peace, War Marshal, is not the same thing as being defenseless. It simply means we prefer alternatives to violence. He looked directly at the Zirion commander. However, some enemies leave us no alternatives. The implications hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. The species they had mocked for 50 years as weaklings had voluntarily chosen to appear weak. The people they had laughed at for suggesting diplomatic solutions had actually mastered every form of warfare imaginable. A Draconis general who had survived the destruction of her fleet spoke in a shaking voice. "What are you saying, that you could have stopped the Dark Fleet at any time?" So Young shook her head sadly. "No, General. We could stop them this way only once, using methods that required extensive preparation and the element of complete surprise. Had we revealed our true capabilities earlier, they would have adapted." She paused, letting that sink in. "This approach will work precisely because they, like everyone else in this galaxy, have underestimated what humans are capable of when we decide that violence is the only remaining option." Dr. Hyun-woo closed his notebook and looked around the chamber. "When humans first reached the stars, we made a promise to ourselves that we would never again be the monsters we had been on Earth. But we also promised that if the galaxy ever faced a threat that could only be stopped by monsters, we would remember how to become them again. The Dark Fleet has forced us to honor that second promise." War Marshal Vex asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What happens now?" "Professor, what happens to the galaxy when this war is over?" So Young smiled, but it was not a gentle expression. "We return to being doctors, diplomats, and peacekeepers, War Marshal. But the galaxy will remember that these are choices we make, not limitations we accept." Captain Min-soo received a priority message on his personal communicator. The text was simple, but he had been waiting for it. "His entire military career operation begins in 6 hours. Release all restrictions." The sleeping giant was finally waking up. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of what everyone believed was the medical transport ship Serenity. But today everything was about to change. The message from Earth Command had arrived exactly 6 hours ago, carrying authorization codes that had never been used in 300 years of human spaceflight. Around him, his crew moved with sudden purpose that would have shocked any alien observer. These people, who had spent months quietly evacuating refugees and delivering medical supplies, were now revealing training that no other species suspected they possessed. Lieutenant Sujin turned from her communications console. "Captain, I am receiving transformation protocols from all human vessels in the sector. The entire fleet is beginning conversion procedures." Taemin nodded as he watched his ship change around him. Panels slid away to reveal hidden weapon systems that had been built into every human vessel but never activated. Medical bay walls retracted to show advanced sensor arrays and cyber warfare equipment. Food storage areas opened to display enough military hardware to outfit a small army. The Serenity had never been just a medical ship. It was a stealth attack vessel disguised as a humanitarian transport. The same was true for every human ship that had operated in galaxy space for the past 50 years. Each one was a military platform hidden beneath layers of peaceful technology. Captain Min-soo aboard the Harmony watched similar transformations occurring. Throughout his vessel, his crew of supposed medical specialists were revealing their true expertise as elite cyber warfare operatives, electronic intelligence specialists, and advanced systems hackers. Communications Officer Jae-ho reported from his station. "Captain, all human vessels are reporting ready status. The entire network is online and awaiting your orders." Min-soo smiled grimly as he studied the tactical displays showing Dark Fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Every enemy ship location had been carefully mapped by human intelligence gathering operations that other species had mistaken for simple refugee rescue missions. The aliens, who had mocked human weakness, were about to discover what 10,000 years of perfecting warfare on a single planet had created when combined with 3 centuries of advanced space technology. War Marshal Vex stood in the Galaxy Council Command Center, watching helplessly as another star system fell to the Dark Fleet advance. His crystalline form had dimmed considerably over the past weeks as defeat after defeat crushed the remaining Allied forces. Ambassador So Young entered the command center, but she was no longer the humble diplomat who had endured alien mockery. She moved with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "War Marshal," she said calmly, "I wanted to inform you personally that human military operations will begin in approximately 1 hour. Vex turned toward her, his form flickering with confusion. "What operations, Ambassador?" "Your people have no military forces capable of engaging the Dark Fleet, So Young activated a holographic display that showed the positions of every human ship throughout the galaxy. There were thousands of them, scattered across hundreds of star systems, all appearing to be simple medical transports and supply vessels. Each of these ships has been gathering intelligence on Dark Fleet operations for months, she explained. We have mapped their supply lines, identified their command structures, and analyzed their tactical patterns while appearing to conduct humanitarian missions. The War Marshal studied the display with growing amazement. You mean your medical ships were actually spy vessels, among other things? So Young replied. Every human civilian evacuation ship, refugee transport, and medical frigate has been conducting military reconnaissance since the war began. We have been fighting this conflict using methods that other species do not recognize as warfare. Dr. Hyun-woo joined them at the command center, carrying data tablets filled with information that made Vex's crystalline form brighten with the first hope he had felt in weeks. Professor, what are you showing me? The War Marshal asked. A complete analysis of Dark Fleet weaknesses. Dr. Hyun-woo replied, their ships are designed to absorb energy-based attacks, but they have no defense against certain other forms of warfare. Their communication systems operate on frequencies we have learned to disrupt. Their navigation relies on quantum positioning that we can manipulate. Captain Taemin received his final orders as the Serenity completed its transformation from medical ship to stealth attack vessel. His mission was to infiltrate the Dark Fleet staging area and plant devices that would cripple their entire fleet from within. The plan was typically human in its complexity and deception. While alien species had tried to match the Dark Fleet strength with strength, humans had spent months positioning assets and gathering information needed for a completely different kind of warfare. Lieutenant Sujin reported from her station. Captain, we are detecting massive Dark Fleet movements toward the Centauri system. It appears they are preparing for their final assault on the core worlds. Perfect, Taemin replied. That will put their entire command structure in one location, exactly where we need them. Signal all human vessels to begin. Phase 1 of Operation Sleeping Giant across the galaxy. Human ships began revealing capabilities that shocked every species monitoring their communications. The medical transports that had seemed so harmless were suddenly jamming Dark Fleet communications with electronic warfare systems more advanced than anything the aliens had imagined possible. Captain Min-soo coordinated the cyber warfare assault from his position aboard the Harmony. His crew worked at computer terminals that had been hidden beneath medical equipment for months, unleashing virus programs that invaded Dark Fleet networks like digital plagues. The enemy ships that had seemed invincible against energy weapons found their own systems turning against them. Navigation computers began sending ships toward empty space. Communication networks filled with false information. Weapon targeting systems started identifying other Dark Fleet vessels as threats. War Marshal. Vex watched in amazement as human tactics unfolded on his tactical displays. This is impossible, he whispered. How long have your people been planning this operation? Since the moment we confirmed that peaceful contact had failed. Ambassador So Young replied, in human military doctrine, this is called total war. Every resource, every technology, every person becomes part of the war effort. She gestured toward the displays showing human operations across the galaxy. We have been seeding Dark Fleet territory with nanoscale devices for months. Our evacuation ships delivered more than just medical supplies to refugee camps. Our food aid contained components that could be assembled into explosives when activated. The scope of human preparation became clear as hidden weapons caches activated throughout Dark Fleet-occupied space. Asteroids that had been hollowed out by human mining consultants exploded from within, destroying enemy supply depots. Space stations that had appeared abandoned revealed themselves as intelligence-gathering posts. Captain Taemin led the first direct assault on Dark Fleet forces, using ships that moved through space like ghosts. The Serenity and her sister vessels approached the enemy staging area completely undetected by sensors designed to track conventional military technology. The Dark Fleet had adapted to counter-energy, weapons reality, warping attacks, and quantum-based systems. But they had no defense against enemies who fought using completely different principles. Human stealth technology made their ships effectively invisible, while human cyber warfare turned the enemy fleet against itself. Dr. Hunwoo observed the battle from Earth Primary Command Center buried deep beneath the planet's surface. Around him, thousands of humans coordinated the most complex military operation in galactic history. Every detail had been planned and prepared over decades, waiting for the moment when humanity's peaceful approach proved insufficient. Status report, he requested quietly. Enemy command structure is fragmenting, came the reply. Their ships are receiving conflicting orders from compromised communication systems, fleet cohesion dropping rapidly as navigation systems malfunction. The Dark Fleet, which had seemed unstoppable against conventional warfare, found themselves helpless against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Their armor could withstand planet-destroying blasts but offered no protection against having their own computers reprogrammed against them. War Marshal Vex contacted Ambassador So Young directly as the battle reached its critical phase. Ambassador, I must ask, could humans have ended this war at any time using these methods? So Young considered the question carefully. No, War Marshal. We could end it this way only once, using tactics that required months of preparation and complete surprise. Had we revealed our capabilities earlier, the enemy would have developed countermeasures. She paused, watching the tactical displays. This approach works precisely because they, like everyone else in this galaxy, underestimated what humans are capable of when we decide that violence has become necessary. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and the galaxy would never be the same. At exactly 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time, the nature of warfare changed forever across the entire galaxy. It began with what appeared to be simple technical failures aboard Dark Fleet command vessels. Their primary communication arrays stopped working, followed by navigation systems, weapons targeting, and even basic life support. Captain Min-Su smiled grimly from his position aboard the Harmony as he watched chaos spread through the enemy fleet. His ship, which had spent months disguised as a medical transport, was now revealed as the most advanced electronic warfare platform in known space. Lieutenant J-Ho reported from his cyber warfare station. Captain, all Dark Fleet communication networks have been compromised. Their ships are reverting to individual autonomous operation with no central coordination. Excellent, Min-Su replied as he studied the tactical displays, showing enemy vessels scattered across 3 star systems. Begin Phase 2 of the operation. Throughout Dark Fleet territory, the months of human preparation began paying devastating dividends. The medical supplies that human ships had been distributing to refugee camps contained microscopic devices that activated on remote command. The food aid delivered to occupied worlds included chemical components that, when combined, created powerful explosives. Captain Taemin led the direct assault on the main Dark Fleet staging area, commanding a strike force of ships that had spent the entire war appearing helpless and weak. The Serenity and her sister vessels moved through space like hunting predators, revealing stealth technology that made them invisible to every form of enemy detection. Target the command nodes, Taemin ordered his crew. Remember, we disable rather than destroy unless absolutely necessary. Even in total war, humans maintained their preference for precision over simple destruction. The Dark Fleet ships that had seemed invincible against conventional energy weapons found themselves helpless against enemies who fought by completely different rules. Their hulls could absorb planet-killing blasts but had no defense against cyber viruses that turned their own systems into weapons against them. War Marshal Vex watched the battle unfold from the Galaxy Council Command Center, his crystalline form flickering with amazement and growing hope. For months, his forces had been systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to exist outside normal military logic. Now he was witnessing the Dark Fleet suffer the same helpless confusion. Ambassador So Young stood beside him, no longer bothering to maintain her humble diplomatic facade. The transformation was remarkable, as she coordinated military operations with the efficiency of someone who had trained for warfare her entire life. This is how humans fight when we have no other choice, she explained to the stunned War Marshal. We do not match strength with strength. We find ways to make strength irrelevant. Dr. Hyun-woo monitored the operation from Earth Primary Military Command Center, deep beneath the planet's surface. Around him, thousands of human officers coordinated the most complex military campaign in galactic history, using strategies that had been developed over 10 millennia of constant warfare on a single world status report, he requested. Calmly, enemy fleet cohesion has collapsed to 15%, and falling came the immediate response. Ship-to-ship coordination is non-existent. Individual vessels are operating, without tactical support. Estimated time to complete mission success 12 hours. The Dark Fleet vessels, which had crushed every conventional military force in the galaxy, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to engage conventionally. Their weapons were designed to absorb and counter energy-based attacks but had no defense against having their own computer systems reprogrammed by human cyber warfare specialists. Lieutenant Su Jin reported from her station aboard the Serenity. "Captain, the asteroid fortress is showing massive internal explosions. The charges we placed during our mining consultation missions are detonating in sequence. The Dark Fleet Command Center, which had appeared to be an impregnable stronghold built into a massive asteroid field, was destroying itself from within." Human engineers disguised as mining experts had spent months hollowing out the rocks and filling them with fusion charges. Captain Taemin watched with satisfaction as the enemy's stronghold tore itself apart. What had seemed like helpful civilian contractors assisting with construction projects had actually been military specialists preparing the battlefield for this exact moment. The precision of human planning became clear as the battle continued. Every aspect of the operation had been carefully coordinated over months of apparent peaceful activity. The evacuation routes that human ships had established were actually supply lines for hidden weapon caches. The medical stations, set up on various worlds, were intelligence gathering posts. War Marshal Vex contacted Ambassador So Young directly as the Dark Fleet began a desperate retreat. "Ambassador, I must understand how this is possible. Your people appeared completely unprepared for military conflict." So Young smiled as she watched enemy ships fleeing in disorder. "War Marshal, you made the same mistake that every species in this galaxy has made. You assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war." She gestured toward the tactical display showing human forces operating throughout the galaxy. "The truth is that humans became very good at warfare precisely because we had no choice. For 10,000 years on our homeworld, if you could not fight effectively, you died. The Dark Fleet tried to regroup and counterattack but found their efforts frustrated at every turn. Human forces seemed to anticipate their every move, using intelligence gathered during months of apparent humanitarian missions. Their communication attempts were jammed. Their navigation systems fed false information. Their weapons targeting corrupted by human cyber attacks. Captain Minsu received reports from human vessels throughout the operational area. The scope of their success was almost beyond belief. Enemy forces that had seemed unstoppable were now retreating in complete disorder. Communications Officer Jae-ho looked up from his station. "Captain, we are receiving surrender requests from multiple Dark Fleet vessels. Their commanders are requesting humanitarian assistance." Minsu nodded approvingly. "Signal all human medical ships to respond to their requests. We fight when we must, but we are still human beings." This decision epitomized the difference between human warfare and that practiced by other species. Even while destroying their enemies, humans maintained their commitment to treating prisoners and casualties with dignity. The battle ended not with massive explosions or glorious final confrontations, but with quiet efficiency. As Dark Fleet resistance simply collapsed, their ships found themselves unable to fight coordinate or even navigate properly. Human cyber warfare had turned their own technology against them. Dr. Hyun-woo received the final status report as the last. Enemy vessels either surrendered or fled beyond the galactic border. Total mission success, he announced to the command center. Enemy forces eliminated or neutralized with minimal casualties on our side, War Marshal. Vex asked the question that would haunt the Galaxy Council for generations. "Ambassador, what happens now that we know what humans are truly capable of?" So Young considered her response carefully. "Now, War Marshal, we return to being the people we chose to become. Doctors, diplomats, peacekeepers, and healers. But the galaxy will remember that these are choices we make, not limitations we must accept." Captain Minsu began converting his ship back to medical configuration as he received messages from across the galaxy. Alien commanders whose fleets had been saved by human intervention were expressing gratitude and bewilderment. A Velox officer whose survivors had been rescued by human forces sent a personal message. "Captain, my people owe you a debt we cannot repay. How can we possibly?" "Thank you." Minsu thought of Ambassador Jin Ho and the small orchid he had carried into that first council meeting so many months ago. "Commander, the best thanks you can give us is to remember that true strength lies not in what you can destroy, but in what you choose to protect." The war was over. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest warriors are those who choose not to fight until they have no other choice. The species that had been mocked as weak cowards had saved them all using methods that no one else had even imagined possible. The Galaxy Council would spend years analyzing human military doctrine, trying to understand how they had been so completely wrong about Earth capabilities. But they would never again mistake human kindness for human weakness.